your local news leader.
Local man's trip to Europe nearly turned tragic when he fell very sick and almost died.
His family desperately trying to get him home for treatment that would save his life.
But in the end, it was an unlikely hero that saved the day. News 10's Jamie DeLine has the story in tonight's special report.
A Clifton Park family says it was absolutely terrifying as their loved one, who was thousands of miles away in Europe, faced a life-or-death situation. Stephen and Kathy Lapidus have traveled the world, a passion they've shared with their two children, Sarah and Jake. But back in January, Stephen took a solo trip to Italy to meet up with extended family members. However, just 2 weeks into his trip, everything changed.
I get some weird text messages the next morning that are complete gibberish, and I think it's probably, him just messing around with his phone because, he had just gotten like a new phone recently. I didn't think anything of it until my mom calls me later that night and is like, "We think your father had a stroke."
A complete shock, seeing as though Sarah had just spoken to her father the night before.
I told my mom, "I'm packing up, I'm coming home, and what should I bring?" And she said, "Funeral clothes."
The doctors in Italy giving Stephen a 50-50% chance to live.
He had been in a coma for a few days, and they said he had sepsis and pneumonia.
I was at a point where I couldn't move my legs. I could only move my arm about this high. This one was okay. And as you can hear, my voice is very slurry.
His voice and leg muscles weakened. After spending 2 weeks with her husband in Italy, Kathy had to fly back to the United States, all while trying to figure out how to cover the cost of getting him back home to his family.
I was like, I hate to leave, and I kept trying to talk to him and say, look, I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if you're in there, but I've got to go home. I can't stay. I'm doing everything that I can to get you out of here.
Finally, after 6.5 weeks of being in Italy, Stephen's doctors gave him the okay to fly back to the U.S. For the long flight home, the airline Lufthansa built a medical pod on one of its commercial flights. Stephen was transported from Italy to Germany, where he boarded a special plane modified just for him.
In the middle of the plane, they take out 4 seats by 4 rows.
In the mini ICU pod, Stephen, accompanied by a doctor and a nurse, then flew into New York's JFK airport and was taken by ambulance to Albany Med.
It was a long flight. I left at 11 o'clock a.m. and got in at midnight. From being married and having my 2 kids, it was the best day I've ever had. It was getting home.
I caught up with Stephen and his family in May at the Saratoga Center for Rehabilitation. There he learned how to walk again, using a walker for support. When I revisited with them at the end of August, Stephen's dream had come true. He was finally in his own home, his health noticeably improving.
After a couple of weeks, I started with a cane.
His road to recovery, an expensive one, costing thousands of dollars. But Stephen did something he always does when he travels. He bought travel insurance, a $79 policy, and
it was covered at 100%, and it was about $70,000.
He bought it through the insurance company Allianz and says without it, he'd probably still be stuck in Italy. Would you say this was the best $79 that you ever spent?
Sure was. Sure was, yeah. Yep. Definitely.
Stephen says he now encourages everyone to buy travel insurance and says despite his ordeal, he would like to travel back to Italy, but first he's just focusing on getting better so he can attend his daughter's college graduation in Tennessee this December. Reporting in the studio, Jamie DeLine, News 10 ABC.
Glad he's on the mend. Makes you think twice about getting that insurance.
Yes, it does. I'm sold.